Hi, so we had a couple of senior guys from World of Warcraft, Teron, Gregory and Stephen Danuser, who were talking about story development in World of Warcraft and, well, specifically in Battle for Azeroth. Now, I've been no stranger to criticising aspects of those story, but I have to say it is something I'm really interested in as well. I mean, at the moment, it's mostly the only reason I'm playing it. So what I want to do is go over some of the things they said about it, some of the things which have encouraged me, some of which have really just reinforced what I've been thinking all along anyway. The first thing to say is that the format was very different to the traditional Q&As that Ian Hazzakostas and Josh Allen have been doing. And this was announced ahead of time, by the way. This shouldn't really have come as a surprise to anyone. I actually liked it, not because I think it's the best way to do something like this, but at the same time, the idea of doing something like this, where you've just got a couple of guys chatting about their work, works. It's really good. It'd be nice to have another Q&A as well, an actual Q&A. But I am going to say this. I have not been happy with the last few actual BFA Q&As, it has to be said. My feeling is that they generally haven't really been answering the questions properly. Now, my attitude is if you don't really want to answer questions, or if you're not going to pick on the questions that people really want to know the answers to, then actually the format they chose, this sort of fireside chat, is much, much better, because the expectations aren't there to be sort of pulled down, and it's actually far more illuminating. You know, that little back and forth works really well. So thumbs up from me for the format of it. Now, there were some points of interest here. And I have to say, I said at the beginning, I don't think the storyline for BFA is bad. What I've had an issue is key moments in the storyline have been done badly, which does sort of spoil it a little bit, because whenever you're sort of reading a story, watching a story, whatever it is, and you're going, yeah, but hang on a minute, no. And if it's a minor thing, whatever. If it's a major thing, But the overall storyline arc is engaging. It is fun. And as I say, at the moment, you know, there's not much else I'm really playing the game for, but the storyline is worth it for me. And I'm super interested to find out what's going to happen next. I'm particularly interested in the Ashara and Old God stuff, which they talked a little bit about, but not in any great detail. But for me, that's the big story there. There were a few little statements, though. I know when it comes to, for example, these plot holes, they did try and suggest that sometimes people mistake the mistakes of a character for the mistake of a writer. Sometimes, granted, but I don't believe that is really the case. I mean, I know one of my biggest bugbears, and anyone who's followed me for any length of time will know this as well, was the cinematic with the meeting in the Lordaeron throne room. You had Sylvanas there, and in went King Anduin. You had Gen. Who else was in there? Oh, you had Jaina and Illyria. Of course, completely forgotten then. So, basically, those four people went in to either capture or kill Sylvanas. Capture or kill Sylvanas. All of them. All of them were totally up for that. They went in there, and we're supposed to... And I criticised this for saying, hang on a minute. First of all, they didn't do that. Second of all, they allowed Sylvanas to get within striking range of Anduin and still did nothing. And we're supposed to believe that all of them, when Sylvanas shot herself up to the airship, basically looked at each other and went, oh shit, we forgot to kill Sylvanas. How stupid. So no, I think that was purely to have a spectacular cinematic at the cost of story. So although what they say is not always going to be untrue, there have been cases where it has been untrue. And there's another one, which I'm going to talk about later with another thing that they said. That being said, there was a lot of stuff they talked about as well that's we've known for a while. But if you're new to it, quite interesting about how long it takes them to develop these story arcs as well. They did have a lot of excitement for their cinematics, though. And quite rightly so. They have become more and more impressive. It's quite spectacular. It's not just... Well, it really is. From expansion to expansion, they talked about the fact they really started to run wild with these things. Well, in Cataclysm, I mean, you had cinematics before Cataclysm, but in Cataclysm, They talked about the fact that their artists had a new toy and they went ran wild with it. And certainly we've had them stronger and stronger each expansion that's come through. Quite spectacular, the cinematics in BFA. You know, from a cinematic point of view, truly spectacular. It's almost like you almost daren't hope to wonder what it's going to be like in Revenge of the Potato People, the next expansion. But for me, cinematics are a double-edged sword because they are spectacular and they're absolutely magnificent when you first see them, especially if you first see them in game when you're in the middle of the story as opposed to on YouTube having a sneaky little look first. But they are part of, for me, what is a problem with WoW storytelling in that you have to follow a linear sequence. And this is one of my issues, that they really need you to play through certain quest lines to get the full story, which, you know, is the most theme park of theme park things to do in an MMO. You're properly on rails when they do things like that. So it's a double-edged sword for me. They, in of themselves, they are spectacular, and I look forward to them immensely. But there's always a little tinge of sadness that the cost of this, the price for these spectacular cinematics, is the fact that we are on rails. We don't really get to explore. We're past. It's almost like doing a ghost train or, you know, some sort of guided tour, you know, around a stately home when we're playing World of Warcraft now. So I think that is the cost of it. I love them talking about Flynn, by the way. He is easily my favourite character in Battle for Azeroth. I love Flynn. You know, I want to be Flynn. Who wouldn't? And it's a shame I'm Horde. I had to get my fill of him during the alpha and the beta, but of course there might be more Flynn that I've haven't experienced that's still to come. So I suppose, need to level up an Alliance character just so that I can see more of him. I think he's magnificent. He may even be my favourite character in World of Warcraft. You know, it's that spectacular. So I enjoyed the fact that they sort of talked about the fact that they brought him in as a counter to Talia. I enjoy the fact that they sort of think in those levels in terms of characters. They don't just think of cool characters. They think of counterpoints of characters and something that, you know, we'll all be able to latch onto in terms of who your favourite. That was brilliant. And yet Flint, I think, is an amazing character. I absolutely love him. I also like the fact that they talked about Talanji and Bunsamdi. There's going to be more interactions between those two because I think they're also, frankly, magnificent characters. Again, in BFA, I think they're amazing. And the fact that there's going to be more interactions with them, I am really looking forward to that. I am spectacularly looking forward to that. One bonus have been Horde. Because, yeah, that... And you can see it anyway. Obviously, there has to be, because poor old Talanji has been dropped right in it by a father. Potentially he felt he had no choice. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who ends up with the upper hand at the end of BFA with that one. You know, because you can be led to think that maybe certain events are now inevitable. They're going to run their course. I don't know. Talanji's a smart cookie. I reckon she might pull one over on him. That would be interesting. I am anticipating something like that. I also found it particularly interesting, although another bittersweet moment, when they were talking about weekly interdepartmental meetings so that everyone can discuss the storylines. And I was tinged with sadness in two ways when they talked about that. Because ordinarily you'd think, so, yeah, great, interdepartmental meetings, everyone's on board with it, everyone's invested, should be fantastic. But for me, there's a couple of things about it. First of all, I'm thinking to myself, why can they not do that between related departments for gameplay? Why can we not have that, which we were supposed to be getting for the encounter design team, the class design team, because that is clearly not happening. So that's a shame. And the second thing is, I also can't help feeling that when they didn't just talk about having these meetings to bring people up to speed with the story, so maybe they could bring that into their own work, but specifically they said to make the story better. That sounds to me like you're having an awful lot of people involved in the process of storytelling. Now, I have always been of the view that when it comes to storytelling for a particular story, you should have as few people as possible, preferably one. Any more than one causes potential for problems. I suppose if you have two really different writers that are both very, very good and respect each other, they can bounce off each other, maybe there's some advantages to that. opening it out to everyone, I can't help but wonder if maybe some of the plot holes aren't as a result of that, because we know that there have been, and this is what I alluded to earlier, certain storylines that have been changed last minute. We know, for example, the whole issue about Saurfang and Sylvanas killing Malfurion, because neither of them did. The story as it now is, as it officially is, as it is in game, is not how it was originally intended to be, as people who got the physical collector's edition found out. So there was clearly a last minute change there, and you can't help but wonder if maybe that just came about because of too many cooks in the storytelling process. I'm not a fan. I think a writer needs to plan out their story long term and go through every aspect of it in detail and cross-reference everything. And really good writers can do that. And I know some people like criticise Christy Gold and stuff like that. And the thing is, if she was doing it and it was down to her, then of course the criticism would be justified. But given that it clearly isn't, I can't help but think that, well, she's not working under the ideal conditions, really. She's obviously happy with those conditions. She's chosen to go and work there. She doesn't have to. But yeah, I just feel it's not. I don't think it's the best system for story writing. If you want to let people in on how the story's going, so just in case, you know, even for gameplay designers, you know, the idea of obviously themed affixes for the +10s for Mythic Dungeons, so you know people can sort of bring it into their own work. Yeah, sure, of course. But actually having them as agents involved in that process, really don't believe that's a good idea. Massively against that. So the other thing I very much approved of was their discussion of the Dark Shore cinematic. They described it as bringing back some of that ferocity to the Night Elves, showing that fierce nature, which I was totally on board with. When I watched that cinematic, that's exactly what I felt. That is exactly what I read into it. This is showing Malfurion in particular with a pair of balls. We always knew Tyrande was fierce, but Malfurion, he was always a little fluffy bunny following Tyrande around, going, "No, Tyrande, you shouldn't be doing that." Ah, bollocks, I'm doing it. Now he's got some bite. I mean, he's still not standing up to Tyrande when she's doing something stupid, but wow, yeah. Absolutely what I read into it. And again, more of that. And of course, there surely is. I don't think this is just about the war front. This is a proper story within Battle for Azeroth, insofar as the Horde and Alliance story is going. You know, the reclamation of Darkshore. It may or it may not actually be reclaimed. Who knows? But they are going for it. And that ferocity of the Night Elves and Malfurion in particular, totally on board with that. I absolutely loved that. I think it was the best part. It was the best point in BFA for me so far, in fact. Now, in terms of choices, they're sort of saying that we're getting meaningful choices in BFA. At the moment, I'm not seeing it. Obviously, the jury can still be out until the end of BFA. I am not seeing it. And the reason I say that is, so if you look at the choices we've had, so as Horde, for example, at the Battle of Lordaeron, we had the choice to have a Blight Sprayer or not. But the end result was the same, exactly the same. So we've also had a choice about whether we want to kill that Night Elf that attacked us, again in the Darkshore scenario. Again, I saw that as a pointless. First of all, she died anyway. Nathanos just killed her if he didn't. But at the same time, there was nothing dishonourable about killing her. Yes, she was beaten, but she attacked us. She attacked us. I'm totally within my rights to kill her. And I don't know why they made a big thing about that. You know, in fact, how many Night Elves did I kill before we got to this one? I killed them all. None of them sank to their knees and gave me a choice of finishing them off or not. They all just died. So why this one? I really don't see that. Then there was the choice about whether to side with Sylvanas or Saurfang. Or remain loyal, should we say. We're still technically siding with Sylvanas. Still doing her like quests, I suppose, when she can be bothered to give us one. But yeah, are we gonna side with Saurfang, or are we gonna sort of, you know, be on Sylvanas' side? You could argue that surely that will be a meaningful choice, but again, I query the fact that it wasn't really a choice of conscience. It was a choice of, do you want a toy or do you not want a toy? And to do it around Christmas time, of course, where whenever anyone asks that question, the answer is always, toy please. And it absolutely was in this case for me. And so I know some people have said, well, you know, I'll choose one thing on this character to get the toy, and I'll choose another thing on this character. Not everyone has multiple characters. I mean, I usually have loads. I've only got one at the moment. So I certainly haven't had a choice yet. And so, yeah, I don't see that. You can at least see how maybe the story would diverge, though, with that. Maybe, because obviously, I suppose in one version of events, at some point, maybe Saurfang could be killed, and then maybe not in another. I don't know. But MMO, how's that going to work? And also, doesn't it go a little bit against what they said in Legion? Because in Legion, of course, they did quite a lot of class and spec-specific quest lines, which people loved. But, you know, Blizzard was saying, you know, at the end of it, ooh, wish we hadn't have done that, because we were creating all these quests that only a certain proportion of the player base were ever going to see. And this is the same thing, isn't it? It's content that the player base is not going to see. So I doubt them, but the jury is out. I'm not going to say they're definitely not going to make it meaningful. It just seems a bit odd to me, because it doesn't seem quite in keeping with what they said before, which might suggest that what they call a meaningful choice ends up, well, not being very different experience for either player, one that chose Saurfang, one that chose Sylvanas. I don't know. They already talked about the fact that the Alliance and Horde War is going somewhere. I mean, I've talked about that before as well. I mean, someone was asking me recently if I could do more speculation videos. The fact of the matter is, I did quite a lot of speculation videos in terms of how I thought the Battle for Azeroth story was going to pan out before Battle for Azeroth came out. Nothing as yet has happened to contradict what I thought. And the last point, of course, what they were talking about is they said they hope that at the end of Battle for Azeroth, well, they hope they will enjoy the story, well, so do I, but they will also see how it has changed Azeroth. And again, that just feeds into exactly what I think is going to happen. I'll just reiterate really quickly. I have done videos in a bit more detail, but I'll just reiterate really quickly. I think we are going to end the threat of the old gods in this expansion. This expansion, not the next one. And I know it looks like a slow burner, because although we had Uldir, we haven't really had old godsy stuff as a major storyline. Well, before 8.2, we know we're going to start getting it then. But I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. Which means, of course, for the next expansion, Revenge of the Potato People, it means we have to have a massive change in direction for the World of Warcraft story. Absolutely have to. Because the Legion has been ended as a threat, and if obviously old gods still a thing, but not if they're not a threat to Azeroth, if we remove them as a threat to Azeroth, and that's really what Uldir is all about, then we are into new territory in terms of enemies. And I suppose with the concept of raids that are at least a little different for Horde and Alliance, maybe they're wanting to move much more into very different experiences for Horde and Alliance in the next expansion. So, although I don't really believe that this expansion is about Horde versus Alliance, I think that's just, a subplot. Maybe the next expansion will be. Maybe that's what I mean. Because also, I'll refer you back to an interview that some other lesser designers, I say lesser, just less well-known, not lesser designers, senior designers, but less well-known, were talking about with regard to storyline months ago. Some people are thinking to themselves that at the end of BFA, maybe Saurfang's going to be War Chief. He's not, right? Some people think Sylvanas will still be War Chief. She won't be. What they said, and this was the super interesting part, not of the Q&A tonight, but of that interview months ago. They said that Sylvanas and Saurfang both represent aspects of the old Horde, different aspects of the old Horde. Sylvanas is all about conquest at all costs. Saurfang is more about his sense of honour. I have to iterate his sense of honour because obviously honour can mean different things to different people. But they specifically described them as old Horde, and they also specifically said there is going to be a new Horde emerging. That means both of them are, well, neither of them actually is a better word to say it, to describe it, are going to be War Chief at the end of this. there is a new horde emerging. Now, what that new horde is going to be, we can only speculate on that. But whatever it is not going to be following the ideals of, and not just not following Sylvanas or Saurfang, not following the ideals of either Sylvanas or Saurfang. Because remember, they represent the old horde. Two aspects of the old horde. So it's all shaping up to be very interesting. Like I said, it was a really interesting, as Q&As go, I know it wasn't a Q&A, but as these chats go, this was the most interesting one I've seen for a while. And maybe Ian Hazacosta should just do that with one of his designers as well. Maybe that would be better. Maybe we'd appreciate it more if they follow this format. If they're not going to, as I say, answer our questions, or they're not going to answer the questions we're really asking, maybe this is just a better way to do it. You know, get a class designer on, talk about that. Get an encounter designer on, talk about stuff like that. The encounter designer actually might be interesting because, of course, he was a well-respected encounter designer before becoming assistant game director and then game director. So maybe that would be the way to go there. But anyway, that's my sort of review of it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed watching the actual event itself. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, share with other people who might also be interested. Comments down below, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.